the yard, might need a guard. Every loss, taking to heart. Me first, that cannot be. Must be these underdog episodes, see? Feeling much better, so suddenly, under the Monica G. Crafted at night while all of them sleep. I won't look a fool, taking this tool, defeating the opposition around me. No, I'm not sorry. Yes, I'm taking this knowledge imparted. Just barking no harm, don't be startled. Yes, I'm taking the title, and it's so vital. Thanks for the ride, I'll never be idle. Turn up the dial, it's about to get wild. And the points gon' pile up.
Dynasty underdog bite down, up at the day and the night. Now, easy as flying a kite. Now, come take a look at it right now. Dynasty underdog bite down, up at the day and the night. Now, easy as flying a kite. Now, come take a look at it right now.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 153 of Dynasty Underdog. I'm your host, Uriah Dawkins, and with me tonight, again, as usual, Willie Beeman. What's up, man?
Uriah bringing the energy tonight. I like it.
Try to. I'm actually pretty excited to hop on tonight, so it's good.
Yeah, hell yeah. I love that. We have a fun episode talking about just like what is Dynasty value. This is going to be fun. We got some news and nonsense, of course, but we have, I think, some fun stuff to jump into.
We're going to talk about any VORP data this week.
No, dude, I don't even think you should mention it anymore. I asked for, questions in the Discord if anybody had any. And of course, Jake Smartass comes in there and is like, what's VORP? I'm just like, bro, I'm dead. Stop. I can't.
We did that. So.
And the P is for player. All right.
All right. It's going good already.
Yeah, we're off the rails.
Sweet. All right, let's hop into news and nonsense as we always do. So again, this popped up. Javonte Williams says he'll be ready for week 1. Okay, so I know I know we've talked about it a bunch, and it's like, oh well, I'll wait and see. But man, it's all about that like off-season hype and coach speak and all that stuff. Like you gotta like careful what you wish for, but there's a lot of smoke here. Like we've heard it from the coach, we've heard it from beat writers, now we're hearing it from him. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm starting to believe, dude.
Yeah, you definitely have to have some discernment when listening to the coach speak and the player hype and all that stuff. But didn't we hear this from J.K. Dobbins last year? And
yeah.
I think he got going pretty early on, and I don't think that's exactly what you want out of Javonte Williams because the re-injury rate is so much higher with these kind of injuries, these complex knee injuries, right? So I think if he comes back, you're likely going to see, even if it's minor, some kind of soft tissue issue, whether it's, hamstring, whether it's calf, something, you know what I mean? Where he's overcompensating and you're probably going to see something like that where he's hindered. So yeah, I don't even know if you want him coming back week 1. I think that's been my take kind of the whole time. Anytime we've talked about this, like, do we really even want him coming back week 1? Wouldn't we rather him just maybe take the time, come back and be strong for the second half of the season for your fantasy team. So yeah, I know everybody gets excited about this and I'm sure he wants to get out there and hopefully he does for him and he's all good. But that kind of stuff concerns me. And, I've been off Javonte Williams, just churn for another healthy running back. So yeah.
All right. These next two we'll do together. Saquon and Jacobs. They're both looking for that second contract. Jacobs said in an interview that he won't be at training camp if he doesn't get a deal done. Saquon, there's lots of like, oh, he's been offered this, he's been offered that. I've seen, reports of him when he's talking like, hey, I don't really want to break the bank here, but, I would like another contract. There's not much we could really say about it. Something's probably going to get done. I don't think we're going to see a Le'Veon Bell situation where any of these guys actually do sit out for a whole year. But so we're doing Scott Fishbowl and we're going to have redraft drafts coming up where, this stuff matters a little more than it does in Dynasty. Like Dynasty, I'm not worried about any of these guys, right? But are you afraid to draft any of these in redraft?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Jacobs really at all. I'm pretty sure he's going to play almost no matter what. But Barkley, I mean, he seems a little bit more serious about getting this long-term contract. I think there was talks about him legitimately not playing if they don't meet, somewhere close to his demands. They put out a report where he turned down $16 million or whatever a year over 2 or 3 years. And he promptly responded on social media that that's cap, lies, fake, just misinformation. So you don't really know what the truth is, what's going around. So I typically just try not to let this stuff impact my evaluations or my draft decisions too much. So yeah, Barkley is sitting there at value, or running back 6 is kind of what his value is in Dynasty. and redraft maybe slightly higher. I don't know, but if he's sitting there at a value, I'm not going to avoid him, over this. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the right take. It is interesting when you see this like get played out through the media. Whenever you start seeing like, oh, we offered this guy this kind of money, that's coming from the front office down to one of the beat writers. Hey, put this report out. That way people, it makes Saquon look selfish, right? And they're trying to do that. So whenever he gets to that point, I've seen it time over time with these guys that that the contracts, the negotiations aren't going well for either side. So
absolutely. A lot of the sources for those kind of reports have an agenda.
Oh yeah. All of them
is what it is. So again, using discernment and try not to let too much impact your decisions. Like, don't go trading away Barkley for less value because he might hold out this year.
Yeah.
Even if he did, his value will bounce back. So unless you're like a contender and you're going to get a piece back that works like that, there's no point in even kind of thinking about it.
Yeah. All right. Next one's kind of cool. It comes from at 32 Beat Writers, the little Twitter account that we've talked about before. And this is a quote from Lions GM Brad Holmes on the whole Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery situation, which I thought that was really cool. So this is a really cool quote. It says, quote, Swift is a dynamic player, and Jamal was a great leader for us, meaning Jamal Williams, and he did so much for us. He had a great season, but I think Montgomery and Jahmyr are different backs. Montgomery does a little bit more in the passing game, and being able to add Gibbs, he's just so dynamic as a receiver. Look, he's a home run hitter. He's a home run hitter as a running back. That's the easy part. What he does as a receiver, he runs routes like a receiver. Like, I don't know. I that makes me feel good about both of them.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
David Montgomery goes there, and at the time Swift was there, and you're like, well, what's this going to be? Is Montgomery going to do the Jamal Williams role? Blah, blah, blah. You just don't really know. And you're hearing it from the GM himself. He has a plan for both of them, and it sounds sexy as hell.
That's a great way to describe it. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that is exactly how I would describe that backfield, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. He's 12th overall pick. Like I'm super stoked about these guys. But what this kind of made me think of was I was listening to Jagger May, friend of the show, Jagger, on on Crossroads, on Dynasty Crossroads with Peter Howard. And he was talking about how the NFL, how the schemes change on defense, and that impacts how offenses attack defense and whatnot, and how the NFL, at least in maybe short term here, is going to start attacking defenses by kind of grinding away with the running game because they've gotten so focused on the passing game on defense. It's just there's it's pretty much empty up front, or there's not nearly as many 8-man boxes is kind of the point, right? So he thinks that the Montgomerys of the world have a much better chance of succeeding, and especially in that situation he's in, I think you could just see what Jamal Williams did there, and they basically have the same situation with him and Jahmyr Gibbs now, and he's a better player. So yeah, I love that, but also I know Brad Holmes, I don't know if it was in that same interview or during the same discussion, but I'm sure this will get everybody hot and bothered. Gibbs is, quote, special weapon like Marshall Faulk or Christian McCaffrey. Right. So, he's getting the Ron Rivera treatment for Antonio Gibson there. So yeah, honestly, if that's going to be kind of the hype that's coming out, any shares you do have, you may want to start shopping. There may be some opportunity if people are just going bonkers over it. But yeah, I love both these running backs, and I think that they're going to be very successful in this offense.
Awesome. Yeah, I like it. I feel like maybe there's a point in time where people thought money was
he's still a value.
Yeah,
he's still a value.
He is.
Let's see. I'm gonna pull up his ADP. I don't know why I don't have this up already.
Hey man, I moved back 2 spots in the rookie draft, and for David Montgomery,
David Montgomery's going 10:05, running back 31.
Jesus,
the 10th round.
He's gonna smash like Jamal. He's not gonna have 16 touchdowns or anything probably, but at that ADP, how can he not smash? That's crazy.
It's like Jonathan Mingo, Kadarius Toney, those kind of guys are going in that area, right? There's some running backs in this area that Alexander Madison, Alvin Kamara, those guys are like definitely worthwhile in that area. But I think he's a very viable option that people are forgetting about, and I've definitely seen him fall further than that. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. This next one, this is a take from Jagger. Said, would you sell Kendre Miller for a second? I haven't listened to the episode yet, so I don't know the whole entire
I
discussion.
think they were talking about it. I forgot who was talking about the second round pick thing, but I thought it was interesting. I think they were talking about this actually. But what I thought was interesting is just Jagger's take on Kendre Miller in general was very similar to my take on it. And him and I, like, we do have a lot of similar takes. Some we vary on, but him and I are both kind of like film guys, and we like to balance it out by, reviewing the relevant data points, the relevant metrics. So I think we kind of both have a very similar process in terms of evaluating prospects. And he came to kind of the same conclusion as me that, as much as he may have been used in college as a pass catcher, he wasn't a very good one. He doesn't really run routes very well. He's not overly skilled at just receiving in general. So I don't think that's something that's going to translate to the NFL. And just in general, I don't think he was very impressive as a runner. Right. And I've talked a lot about just, his kind of upright style of running, and just there's a number of different things in his game. And I just thought it was interesting because you don't hear it often. You hear a lot of hype, I think, for Kendre Miller. And I think that this was kind of one of the first people I've heard echo some of the things that I've been talking about. So I do think that there's a little bit more concern than maybe the market is willing to admit, or, I just think there's a little bit more there than the market's willing to admit. So I do ask, would you take a 24-second for Kendre Miller?
No, because I spent a 30-second for Kendre Miller.
Fair.
Right?
Fair enough.
I mean, most people are what? Hell, I think I saw him go in the first in a couple drafts.
It's happened. Mm-hmm.
And he never fell out of the second. So why would I do that?
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't think I would either. I do think that that's fine value for him, but just kind of based on what you're saying, it's a market thing, right? It's the fact that, like, you don't need to sell him for a second. You could probably add a second, add a third, and maybe get to a 24 first. If you wait until in season, he might just do something in season. One game is maybe enough for somebody to spend a first on him without you adding anything. So I think your eye's probably right here. But I do think that this is probably where his value should be. He should just be worth a second. And to me, I mean, we've seen him go in the second. He is worth a second, I guess, technically 23, but not worth re-rolling it a year from now without knowing what kind of the upside potential could be.
Exactly. I mean, if you had most rookie drafts are probably done by now, probably all of them. But if there were a rookie draft tomorrow, Kendre's probably still going to go in a second. So right now, I don't see any reason to do it unless you've made some trades and like Kendre was a throw-in piece already, and you're not a believer. Then go get your second. Like that's what he's worth right now.
So since we're on Kendre Miller, Saints, Alvin Kamara, news came out about Alvin Kamara that he what did they drop the felony charges? I think is what happened.
Yeah.
So I mean that's big news in terms of like punishment wise. Like he's not going to jail. Like that's not happening. You know what I mean? So there's no issues. They never do, right? But so there's no issues in terms of missing time from that perspective, right? Like the court case is going to go how it goes. He's probably, I would think the league's going to suspend him somewhere between 3 and 5 games anyway. Just like, dude, you can't be doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, does that muddy the waters? Like, how do we feel about? Because the backfield's like Alvin Kamara. We kind of like Jamal Williams, and then we're talking about Kendre Miller, maybe not. So. Like, are you still in on Alvin Kamara? Do you think we can get him at a value? Because he's still going late in like Dynasty, in underdog drafts, like best ball drafts. I see him pretty late. Like, I mean, he was, like I just said, he's a 10th round pick in Dynasty.
Yeah, he's probably a value for this year. And Dynasty, I'll be trying to get out on Kamara. I mean, right now it's probably not the best time because you're not getting a whole lot out of him. But I don't know. I guess he's a hold. He's not someone I'm trying to buy, and he's not someone I could willingly sell right now for what you could probably get for him.
Yeah, I think the only places that I'm comfortable taking him dynasty wise are in startups because he tends to fall if he falls essentially, I think I got him in DU3 in the 11th round. And at that point it's like Yeah, like you kind of got to just take the value there and hope he plays. And at that point, he's probably going to score you way more points than most of the players that you could take there. So
Absolutely.
I do think in startups, he's worth selecting, especially for win now teams.
Absolutely. And hey, this is a good segue to the next question. So how do you handle aging running backs?
So I was kind of thinking of this along the lines of like the Derrick Henrys, right? The ones who are just like so good that whatever value you're kind of going to get for them, like in terms of production, they're so good in terms of production that in season, you probably could get more value as long as he's healthy, right? At some point, like he booms and you're just like, somebody's going to pay a lot for this right here. Some contender is going to pay me a couple, first plus whatever. Cause that's about what he's 27, 28 years old. Now he's 28, I think, less tread on the tires, but older nonetheless. And I think it's just one of those things where like, he's basically worth a mid to late first right now already. Mm-hmm. Right. Like that's about it. So that doesn't feel good when you're trying to get out of a player like Derrick Henry, right? Like one first doesn't feel like it's going to cover the return on that investment. So how do you handle do you let them die on your roster? For me, I think the one thing I've been thinking about is packaging them to try to tier up to something else, like use them as bait essentially in a trade with like maybe a mid-tier quarterback and try to get up to an elite quarterback. You know what I mean? Maybe like a Trevor Lawrence before he hit or something like that. Like, I don't know. How would you handle this?
Well, I mean, it's a cop-out, but it's really roster dependent. I think if you have a contending team that's largely older, you just got to roll with it, right? You got to roll with it through, say, 8 weeks and see where you're standing in the league. And you kind of, this is something you have to do in season. This is not something you want to try to manage in the off season, in my opinion. Like, there's no reason to be selling or buying Derrick Henry right now. You got to see what's going on with him, right? And how it's going to affect your team. If it's going to help your team. Derrick Henry, when he's on the field, is helping your team a whole lot. But say, you don't have the rest of the pieces and you're sitting there, you're projected, 6th seed, 5th seed or something like that in the playoffs. Like, then you just get out on him, just like you were saying to one of the other contenders. And for a stud like that, you don't take anything less than a first. And then just like another thought is like any one of those like big time running backs, the Dalvin Cooks, the Zekes, the Derrick Henrys, Christian McCaffreys of the world, at their height, they're worth like 2 firsts, right? Pretty much is how it goes. Maybe a little bit more. Christian McCaffrey's definitely probably been traded for like 3.
Definitely, I've seen it. Yeah.
But you're spending high draft capital to get them, or you traded a lot to get them, and you've had them for 3-4 years. I think it's smart to try to be prudent and look ahead and get out on that player before the value starts reaching that second round. Because then, I mean, you had a lot of years of points from them, but you weren't able to like kind of recoup what you paid for them. I mean, I think that's kind of one of those things in Dynasty is like, okay, I drafted a player in this round. You want to get out of them before they're worth less than what you paid for them. So even if I could only get 1 first for Derrick Henry, if that happens to be the 110, at a point where Derrick Henry is no longer useful for my roster, then I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like I didn't really lose a whole lot, had a lot of years of production. Here we go, it's reset. But if you're holding on to one of those old guys and you're only able to get it, that's like a Zeke right now. Like you're not getting a first.
That's for sure.
You might not get a second. Like Dalvin Cook goes for 2 seconds. Like that's the point right there. When it's like 2 seconds value, like you got to get out. You got to find somebody who's willing to do it. Otherwise, he will die in your roster and literally just not be in the league, right? So
it's almost like the point. It's a good value point to kind of use as a threshold that like when they get to about first round, just 1 first round pick value is when you should probably start trying to get for that or plus, like right then. Like, okay, this is about like right now, Derrick Henry, where he's at. If you're not contending, if you don't need those points, and like it's much better to sell a running back in the offseason than buy one. I've been telling everybody don't buy a running back. So you could totally sell one for the right price. If you can sell Derrick Henry on that squad for a first and a second, a 24 first and a second, I'd probably be pretty comfortable doing that and feel good about it. Just knowing what I know about the position and the decline and in value, like we're just talking about, you don't want to get to that second round spot because you're going to feel really bad about it. That's when you're going to start feeling really bad. I mean, just imagine having Zeke right now. It would kill you in terms of, feeling when you get rid of him. So I think that's a good way to look at it. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Like Zeke will die on all my rosters because I can't sell him. I'm just going to, hopefully he's like a good backup for like the next 5 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Flex play type deal. Like a
5 years. Wow. Man,
well, I mean, I think he's
you're
like
hoping and praying over there.
3 years. I don't care. It's just something. I don't want to
5 years.
See him sail off into the sunset.
Oh my God. Can you imagine what he looks like running in 5 years compared to, oh my goodness.
Hey, all
that guy is going to be on, Walker out there.
First and goal. That's all I need him for is first and goal out there.
Oh my goodness. All right. Yeah. That's wild. Okay. I like that. I like going over that. That actually really helped. I think that actually really helped me in terms of how I can view it going forward with like the point when to kind of start getting out. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So that's a cool conversation.
All right. This is something that you came up with in the text and you're just kind of very philosophical here. What is value? It's like, it depends what your definition of is.
What is?
What is? Well, it is. So,
I'm gonna cut that.
Oh man. So, how do we determine value? How do you determine value?
Yeah, so I don't want to take full credit for coming up with this topic necessarily. When I was on the Superflex Super Show with John Hogue, he kind of asked me like how do you determine value? And I think I have a very clear idea of how I do it. Like I know exactly how I determine value from my perspective, but I think it's a really good conversation to have just, theoretically, like what is value to us? Like how do we interpret value? How do we come up with value? And does everybody think of it the same way? Right. And I think that's probably the most important part of it, but one way or another, for me, the way that I come up with value, and I think a big part of this, and you don't have to have rankings if you're as locked in as kind of we are, you probably have a good idea of what one player's value is versus another, versus a first round pick, second round pick, third round pick, that kind of thing. For me, though, it's very helpful is kind of at least one time, and I update mine fairly often, but at least one time putting together dynasty rankings, right? Putting together rankings, which gives you a roundabout guide to what you kind of think about player value, right? It's not perfect. You can't say that, I trade the fourth player for the fifth player, you can't say that wouldn't always work. Context matters, the draft you're in, the trade you're doing, the team you have, it all matters. So, but I think that's a good way to start. Then you have to look at the market. Like, what is the market doing, right? Go to different sources. You go to Keep Trade Cut, which is going to be different than ADP, which I think is probably the best, the best market perspective you can get. And you just go to all those sources and you kind of get an idea of what others are thinking compared to what you're thinking, right? And then from that point on, I think I know what my value is and I know what the larger groupthink value is. And then I can kind of that way. So that's value to me, right? There's no, like one player doesn't have just like X value that we can all point to. It just doesn't, right? Because in my opinion, people's biases, there's just so many factors that go into what a person thinks of a player and how they value them. It could be they don't like what they do off the field. It could be they like the color of their jersey. They like their name. They like what school they went to. You know what I mean? It could be so many number of things that makes one player more valuable to somebody than it does to me. So value is totally fluid and barely real, but I think that you have data points that you can use if you have your own value, and then you have market value, and you can basically play them against each other. You can say, okay, I value this player higher than the market, so this is what I have to do with them. They value this player higher than the market, so I can go buy them, whatever it is. So I think that's how I interpret value, and that's how I utilize it. What about you?
Yeah, I always, just because, I mean, don't mean to brag, but I've never really had like a rebuilding roster yet. Like I've always been making the playoffs in pretty much all my leagues, year after year so far. So like I'm always looking for points. I'm working for points. Age kind of matters a little bit, but when it comes to value, the best way to check it is ADP for sure. Like what players are going in there if you're doing a 1-to-1 swap or whatever it happens to be. But I just like to see, okay, how many points is this player projected to score this year versus the other players or whatever in the pool of the trade that I'm going for? Well, talking about value, you're talking about trading, right? So, if I'm going to be trading away like maybe a 27-year-old running back who's going to score me 14 points per game, but I could trade him away for a wide receiver that's 25 or 24 that's going to get me like 12 points per game or something like that. I might do something like that because I know that running back isn't going to be doing that for very much longer. So there's a lot of value there where somebody's going to give up a lesser player as far as point scoring goes, and I might be able to get out on a aging player. Anytime I think there's a player that is going really, really late in drafts, but is still putting up a lot of points, like we've talked about before, kind of with the redraft versus dynasty ADP, I value the players that are going to score me points a lot more than I do age, draft pedigree, team, offense, anything like that. That's what it kind of comes down to me. Like I just kind of value the player. I mean, it seems simple, right? Everybody wants players that are going to score you points, but some people are really focused on having really young rosters or a lot of draft picks or trying to churn and burn, having those quote unquote like sexy rosters. I don't really care about that. Your sexy roster could look pretty old in short order. So I just value the players who, are going to score me points. That seems like a stupid answer, but it is what it is. I really look to that. Like I don't really care about being younger or having the hot new thing. I want a guy who's going to plug and play and score me points.
You don't like the roster that's going to get the most likes on Twitter? What's wrong with you?
No.
No, I actually love the way that, the place that you took that, because it was totally different than my answer. And also you said a couple things like value. We're talking about trading, right? And it's like, are we? Because like, what is value to you? And value to you is points, right? Value more than anything. Obviously, there's other factors involved depending on what you're doing. When you're trading, points may not necessarily matter to you as much, right? So value, again, is fluid, even, I think, to an individual. Like, to me, like my value of players may change depending on what my team makeup is, what I'm trying to do. If I'm trying to contend, then players with points are going to hold more value to me, right? Than dynasty value. So from that perspective, I may throw my rankings out the window and say, yeah, I'm going to trade a younger player with more dynasty value for an older player with less dynasty value. May score me more points, but I may be losing on this deal. And
yes.
So does value even matter at some point? Like, I think it totally matters because you can manipulate it. You can manipulate your opponents with your values against market values against your values, the whole 9 yards. So I do think I just think it's a very, value is something that we talk about a lot, and we just say like, oh, this player's value is this, but I don't think we necessarily define what we mean by value all the time, right? Because when I look at players' value for this year, like I'm also looking at points too. Like I'll do the projections, like I'm going through them right now. I do the projections and I want to see where these guys are all going to line up in terms of this year and how that impacts kind of what I'm looking for and what I want, and what you think of those players going forward, because again, points per game is fairly predictive of future success and future points, right? So all those things are important in terms of creating a value for the player that I'm ranking, right? But yeah, it's just one of those things that changes, I think, depending on what you're doing, and it's something you should always keep in mind in terms of how you're creating your own values, what you think of players, and what you perceive market value to be. Or are you just trading players like to another? Are you making trade offers based on your values alone? Because if you're doing that, you're not doing it right. First of all, you're leaving a lot of meat on the bone, because many times if you're doing that, you may undervalue a player and just make a terrible trade. You may overvalue a player and offend your trade partner on a level that you can't come back from. You know what I mean? There's no recovery. So I just think that like it does happen, but I just think that, you know, value plays a part in it. And I think that's how it happens is they really aren't taking into account other people's value, market value, what their team makeup is, and what, you know, kind of the value of the player you're trying to trade is going to actually mean to them. So I think that's what John is kind of getting at when he's like asking people about what value is, because at some point, like your version of value doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot simpler if there was just like one set of like rankings, or
we would we wouldn't be here. And also I don't think like it would be fun that way either.
No, not at all. I honestly, I think I brought this up before. Like, how fun would it be if there was like there just were no trade calculators and no rankings, and like you just went off like your own personal shit? Like, that would be awesome.
That's what they used to do.
I know, like back then, like that's the edge. Like how keyed in are you, you know? But yeah, that's fun. Yeah, value, it really is different. I know that there are certain people out there that value age a whole lot more than I do.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
And so I try when I make my trades or accept trades, I try to think about that. Like, I don't mind giving up a little bit younger player if I'm going to keep my roster going, scoring points.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talked about this offseason was like kind of going and looking at your opponent's rosters in general and kind of the moves they make, the transactions they make, like what they do. Do they buy young players all the time? All you have to do is go into MFL, go to trades, go to each team, and you can literally see what they trade for often and see, do they just love young players? And you can take advantage of that. If you're Uriah and you don't care about youth that much, and you're looking for points, those are your targets right there. That's how you're using the value. That's how you're kind of attacking your league mates with value. And yeah, I think that's a great conversation. So I don't think everybody thinks about how they build value in general.
No, not enough at least. All right. This next one, approach with a dynasty roster. This basically, talking about kind of like an aging roster and what do we do?
Yeah, that's kind of it is. So specifically, I was talking about it, kind of a specific situation, and okay. I think a lot of dynasty like managers find themselves in this situation after a number of years of playing, or going for a win now kind of approach. You have a team full of old assets, probably one or two that aren't super old, but that are really good, valuable assets. Say it's a team where you've been competitive for a title, or you've won a title in the past year or two, but you just see this team is like just breaking down. Old, you have Kelsey, you have Eckler, you have these are the kind of assets you have. They're still good assets. They're great assets. They're probably going to help a team win this year, maybe yours even, but they're dying assets. They're on the way out. How do you handle a roster like that? Do you just play it out hoping to win another title because that's our goal in fantasy most of the time? Or do you try to do something crazy, just spin the dial, churn the whole thing and try to win in a year or two? Like how do you approach it? Because that if you're trading those pieces, people are going to see that you're dumping them and they're going to try to get them at value, and they're not going to give you the most value. Your league's going to see what you're doing. So like, what do you do with that?
I know what I would do with that. Kind of in that situation right now in a sleeper league. I came in second last year. I came in second the year before. I have like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, all those guys, high scoring players.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, here real quick. So I'm going through it right now, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go try to win this damn thing.
Hell yes. That's kind of the only answer, I think.
Yeah. So if I could do this. Yeah. So Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Freiermuth, Chubb, Godwin, Damian Harris, Cousins. I mean, and then really, really good bench. But they're all, I don't have any hardly any second-year players, any third-year players, anything like that. But this team's gonna go to the championship, most likely.
So
if it doesn't,
okay,
this is if it doesn't, you find yourself a squad like that that's old, but they're scoring hella points. You're gonna make the playoffs, but you may not advance. And this is where like no trade deadline really, really helps. Once you're eliminated, sell to the highest bidder. Who wants to buy a championship? And you just send them off. You send them off for younger players. You send them off for picks. And you're going to still be left with a bunch of old guys that are going to score you a lot of points next year. But hopefully you could get rid of a couple of those before they start losing dynasty value. So yeah, I'm going to go try to win this damn thing. I'm going to go win the whole damn thing. And if I don't, I'm selling. And I think that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, especially in a lot of leagues we play in don't have trade deadlines, so you can definitely enact that. You can definitely enact that plan on your opponents down the stretch. But even if you do have a trade deadline, say it's somewhere between week 10 and 10 and like usually it's 10 and 12, somewhere between there. Even if you do, you just got to be really honest with yourself. Honest with yourself. Don't tell yourself you're going to win a championship because you just want to on the last leg of this thing. You tried. You did your best. It didn't work out. Admit it to yourself and do the same thing Uriah's talking about before the trade deadline and get rid of guys. Now, let me ask you, Uriah. I love this roster you have because it's so perfect for what I'm talking about in terms of all the assets you have. You have an elite QB. You have Josh Allen. What do you do with that if you don't win? Do you sell him? Because that's your that's your anchor.
No,
that's your anchor.
Yeah, you're keeping Josh Allen until he's not Josh Allen anymore. Yeah. Absolutely not. Like I know there's a lot of people out there like his value's never going to be higher. Go ahead and sell him for 2 firsts, get a young stud and a couple firsts. Like no, or I could just keep him on my roster and have like a top 5 dynasty running back for the next running back.
Yeah, maybe
for the next 5-6 years. Like I'm never ever mad setting a lineup and I see that Josh Allen's there in my starting quarterback position, and I'd be sad to see him go. There's no way I will be selling Josh Allen on this team.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
If you're that's a team where like, and you can do the same thing with Kelsey and one of those running backs or even a receiver, but you can essentially go and package Derrick Henry and Chubb at the deadline or after you've gotten kicked from the playoffs, booted from the playoffs. You can sell both of those for like intense value, most likely if they're both healthy. Same thing with like a Kelsey and one of those guys. Like you could, I'm talking about like 2 first-round picks and a young guy. You could just start like getting a lot of value that you're just not going to be able to get a year from now, or even 3 weeks from when you do that after the championship, and everybody starts looking at next year's values. So yeah, I think that's a really good approach that Uriah is kind of talking about there. But you do have to have an active league. That's literally the only thing. But why are you playing in a league that's not active?
Exactly. Just leave them. Just leave them. It's okay. It's one of the best things I ever did.
Oh my!
Shout out safe leagues.
We need to get DU2 like pumping, bro. I don't know. So hopefully this season, just wakes them up because you guys bug me.
Yeah, start booting them.
I love all our listener leagues, but DU2,
so
step it up.
There are 2 things, 2 key tools that like you could help. This is a new one that we had Kevin Coleman on, @boys_22. Shout out from the Debbie Royale. And he had mentioned in that pod a newer website that probably not a lot of people have heard about. So we'll talk about it again. It's called Dynasty/daddy.com. And you could go in there and you could put in your MFL login user information. You could put in your sleeper ID, click a little link, and it gives you a decent little. I've packed in the DU leagues. I'm going to go and run this for all of them. It's very similar to what I did in R last year, looking at like, are you contender, pretender, shows you strength of your. It ranks your each position: quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, running back, 1 through 12. 1 being you have the best room out of everyone else in your league. 12 being you have the worst room out of everyone in the league, and that'll kind of help you determine where your team is at now. It's not perfect. Like I'm sure they do some mumbo jumbo in the background for that app that gets it pretty close to show you like where you kind of line up with everybody else. It says that Billy is the number 1 contender in DU1, so there's probably a problem there. But check it out, Dynasty.
Sounds like Dynasty Daddy is right on point. Sounds like they're cooking with gas over there.
It's cool that what it shows me is that I have the number 1 ranked running back room there, which is true. I have just a ton of running backs, even after selling some last year. But I have the worst wide receiver room. So what does that tell me? I need to go find the guy who has a better wide receiver room than he does a running back room and make a trade. So it's free. It's easy to use. Check it out. We're not sponsored or anything. I found it very useful and easy to use. The other one is for in season on MFL, looking at the all play record. So you're sitting there week 8, week 9, week 10, trade deadline's coming up soon. Maybe you're 6-4 and you're like, oh, a couple unlucky weeks. I should maybe be 8-2. Well, you could look, how would you have fared against everybody? And if your all play record is like worse than your actual record, it means that you've been kind of lucky. And that could be kind of a wake up call saying, hey, yeah, you maybe need to start selling before the trade deadline. So check those 2 things out. That'll help you.
That's one of your yearly ones. I know you say that all the time.
I do. Yep.
Checking the all play, but it's honestly, it's a good one. And I forget it almost every time until you say it again. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great one to look at while I'm just checking over my teams during the season. Like that is, it really is kind of like a little cheat code to see where you're actually at. Cause he's right. If your all play record is worse than your actual record, your team's not that good. It's just, there's variance and you're getting lucky in fantasy. Like many do.
If you're like 3/4 of the way through the season and you're technically ranked like 4th or 5th in the league, say 5th in the league, but you have a guy that's ranked 6th with a better all play record, or a guy ranked 7th with a better all play record, and then you have guys that are ranked, 1st and 2nd, and they're like at 80 something percent all play, and you're sitting at like 60% all play with a couple guys who are a little bit higher than you. Like you just know you kind of got lucky along the way, and you could really hope that you get lucky the rest of the way, but that's probably not the best way to look at it. I think that's a good sign that says, hey man, it's time to bail out for this year,
or add some significant firepower.
Exactly.
Do one or the other, whatever your heart desires and what your team.
That's the shit or get off the pot moment.
Exactly.
You got to make a decision. So
exactly. No, that's a great. That's such good advice from your eye there. Love that.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while we broken clock is right twice a day, right?
That's right.
All right, we ready to finish this off with some trades?
We are. So this one I wrote down right away because I just really want to talk about it. I got an offer from our buddy Ben in DU2, and he sent me a whole 24 picks, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And he wanted to get Chubb and Pacheco. And I was like, man, I have a lot. I was just talking about it. I have a lot of strong running backs in that team. I could afford. I won this league last year, by the way. So I'm like, man, if he wants Chubb, now's a good time to get on Chubb, as we've been talking about. But I'm like, man, I need to get by with points somehow still. I can't lose Chubb's points altogether just for some picks. I won last year. There's no reason for me to go out and get the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th for next year. I don't even want his 3rd and 4th. So I'm like, well, I'm going to try to. I don't like taking. I just don't like picking 3rd and 4th round picks that much. But so I looked at his roster and I come up with a bunch of different solutions. And I instead of just declining or rejecting, I actually did a counter, which I don't do a lot of, just because I was interested. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I could get rid of Chubb. I really wanted to see what Pacheco will be, and he has CEH, so I'm not sure why he wanted Pacheco too. So, which is kind of just weird to me. But I wanted to keep Pacheco, wanted to get rid of Chubb, but I needed to kind of replace some of his points. So I sent him the offer for DJ Moore because I'm weak at one wide receiver in that squad. DJ Moore is 26 or whatever, and he's a good player. He's a really good player, and he will score me points. And I thought value-wise, to be about a 2nd for his team should finish would be mid to late. So I sent him DJ Moore in the 2nd for Chubb, no Pacheco, and he just declined. Really? Are any of these interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean the DJ Moore in the 2nd one, I'm kind of surprised. That seems like a good trade for.
And he has a lot of wide receivers, young ones, established ones. He's solid at the wide receiver position, so I thought it would get done.
I definitely thought that one would get done. I mean, I'm plugging it into to Dynasty Trade Calculator because I just want to see. Not that that's like what his values are necessarily, but yeah, I mean that's pretty close. I guess they have pretty much DJ Moore and Nick Chubb valued the same, and the second is addition on top, but not much. So that's interesting, man. I think like in season, you could easily get that or more for Chubb, to be honest with you. Like once he starts scoring points and he's, dominating touches on that team, I think the price just goes up immediately. I don't know if we're trying to buy low, not that that's necessarily buying low, but like that's kind of, I feel like the going price. But then again, maybe he's thinking, look, let's wait more towards the season, make sure everything's the way it is. We talked about this a lot too. Like you don't need to buy running backs. Like we were saying a minute ago, you need to buy running backs right now. So it's like, if you're not getting them at a good value, and this is, I guess, technically giving a value to the market, then it doesn't really make sense to do it. Yeah. I wouldn't do the 1, 2, 3, 4 either if I were you.
No.
For Chubb and Pacheco, that's just too much in general. I don't even know if I would do like straight up 1, 2, 3, 4 for Chubb, to be honest with you. I see such a good season coming from him. I just don't know if there's any reason to sell at value or low. You know what I mean? You kind of got to get plus on him, I think, at this juncture with his situation, with what the outlook is. There's just so much opportunity there. It doesn't make sense to sell him low right now when you have months to go.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt. Like it would have hurt moving Chubb, just like my chances to repeat because he's going to score so many points. But I thought, well, my wide receiver room it's shaky. So I was like, okay, I could do that. Keep Pacheco. Hopefully Pacheco has a season similar to last year, maybe a little bit better. And then DJ Moore is going to score me probably more points than any other wide receiver I have on my roster right now. I still would probably be losing some points, just hoping for more production from some of the young running backs I have on my team. So I thought it was fair. I thought it would get done, to be honest. So
I did too. I mean, I guess I think that the market is lower on DJ Moore than they might actually be.
Yeah.
Going to Chicago and the volume, yada yada yada. But yeah, I mean, I thought that would get done too. I think that would have been a good trade for kind of both sides. I think it's fair. It's pretty fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Surprised he didn't take the bait. Interesting.
Damn you,
okay,
Ben.
Cool. Yeah, Ben's sharp and he's tough. He's tough to trade with. Yeah, just like all of us, like tough to trade with. It's not easy. All right, so we have a Discord trade. Wanted to go over it real quick. Our buddy Joe, who won the invite to the Warrior Bowl, he's been trying to make a trade, and this is kind of what it finally came down to. And I think originally he was getting back Cortland Sutton instead of the last player that I'll be mentioning in this deal. So it goes, he sent Cam Akers, DJ Moore, speak of the devil, Jaden Reed, the new Packers wide receiver, for Derrick Henry, Treylon Burks, and Juwan Johnson, the tight end for the Saints. And let me give that to you one more time. There was a lot of players there. So he sent Cam Akers, DJ Moore, Jaden Reed for Derrick Henry, Treylon Burks, and Juwan Johnson. Mute.
Yeah, okay. I like it. He's probably competing. I like that he got a young piece back in Burks, Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. I like his side better, just in general. Cam Akers, man. Hey, he got out on Cam Akers, right? So
great way to get out.
Now you don't have to worry about it, right? Yeah, I like this for him. Juwan Johnson will be interesting to see what kind of happens with him this year. In general, I like that trade. DJ Moore, it's kind of a player I want to keep, but I mean, like DJ Moore or Treylon Burks.
It's kind of a right? It's kind of a wash, and like yeah, depending on your build, like if you can tolerate waiting a year for Treylon Burks, might be worth it.
Might be worth it. And what do you got? Akers or Henry?
Easily Henry.
It's easily Henry. I know he's going to fall off a cliff soon. It's going to happen, but
it doesn't matter.
At least he's going to stick around. Like even if
Cam Akers is still trying to climb back up on the cliff to fall off again. All right.
Exactly. And then you have Jaden Reed, who I have absolutely no faith will do anything there. I think the other wide receivers and even the new tight end on that roster is better than Jaden Reed. So,
damn, which one? Because there's two of them. Brendan Strange and Tucker Or not Tucker Craft. I don't know. Somebody is it Tucker?
Yeah, whoever the fuck they drafted.
Yeah. Fair enough. Better than Jaden Reed though.
I don't think Jaden Reed's a very good wide receiver. So.
Oh man, I liked him out of Michigan State.
I believe he was pretty very low in the model. So
he was.
If I remember correctly, like pass wide receiver 12 out of the group. So
the model rules all. The model rules all. Yeah,
it's been pretty good last couple of years.
It has. The model's great. Juwan Johnson, interesting. Joe's planting his flag on him. I think that I was a big Juwan Johnson guy, like really back end tight end, and he might still be the guy. But who's the guy that I'm thinking of that's over there now? Foster Moreau. Yeah, he had the cancer. They still gave him the money. He's back. I think they want him to kind of be the guy, and I think he's a better prototypical tight end, like can do more things than Juwan Johnson, who's more of like a big slot receiver. But that said, Joe could be right on Juwan Johnson. He doesn't make or break this deal. Like Juwan Johnson for Jaden Reed is whatever. But yeah, easily for me, Henry over Akers. I said this in the chat when he originally posted like the first deal that had Cortland Sutton instead of Juwan Johnson, which, whatever. But like I guess Juwan Johnson is fine compared to him. But I think Burks and Moore is like, I just think people are sleeping on Burks. I like Treylon Burks a lot. I think he has a lot of value. I think that he's I think that he's a lot like DJ Moore, to be honest with you. He's a big play machine. So I think you might just be getting younger DJ Moore, even though in kind of in the same situation that DJ Moore was always in. Now DJ Moore may be
crappy quarterback for your career.
But it can get right. It can get right faster than we think. So never know.
I just think the huge is like the two big pieces. It's Derrick Henry and Akers. I think it's a smash there. Even though Henry we know is going to fall off soon, but Akers, like you said, he's not even at a point where he could fall. So I think it's a great way to get out on Akers. And so, like on Shark Tank, for that reason, I like Joe's side of this trade more.
Yeah, I do too. I think that was a good way to. Also like what I'll say about the Cortland Sutton, Juwan Johnson part. Not anything about like the dynasty value or anything, but I think like he got a player that he wanted. Yeah. Right at the end of that deal, he didn't want Cortland Sutton. So one way or another, like Juwan Johnson is a better player for his team, and he believes in him, and that is kind of what we're talking about of value, right? Yeah. His value of Juwan Johnson is way higher than most people's value, probably, and that's okay. You got to plant your flag sometimes on these guys, and sometimes those edges matter. Make a difference, matter, whatever.
The feeling that you have. This is one of the things about Dynasty, because it's still fun, right? Planting your flag and having it pan out feels so good. Feels so good. So if Juwan hits, right, has like a top 10, top 8.
That's all you need. That's all you need.
Right? You know what I mean? You're like, okay, all right. I did it.
I was right.
Cortland Sutton ends up, wide receiver 36. So then,
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so we had one more question come from the Discord. This is Jay Kornblum, friend of the show, has been on the show, did Any Given Pod with me for a while. Love when he brings the questions in. He said, players you would trade Jahan Dotson, wide receiver for Washington Commanders now. Jahan Dotson 1-for-1. So what player would you just trade straight up? Would you trade Jahan Dotson for straight up? Who would you feel comfortable? I'll let you go first. I have a couple.
I should have been thinking about this a little bit more. It's interesting. I was actually
you want me to go first while you look at, you can like ADP or something, or you got some in your head?
Just off the top of my head, I think DJ Moore. I'd go ahead and just trade him off for DJ Moore. Okay. And I think you might actually go get a little bit plus. I don't know. Dotson's value is pretty high still, right?
Yeah, he goes mid-first, about around 2.5 behind him in startups, but in turn, I could look it up on Dynasty Trade. Okay, there you go.
It's all good.
No, I mean I have it right here.
DJ Moore. I might trade him straight up for his counterpart on the team, Terry McLaurin. Just I think he's a better player. I know Dotson had a pretty good rookie season, and maybe I'm ignoring it, but I'm still like
similar value, by the way, to DJ Moore.
Okay, see, there you go. And I'm still kind of resting on maybe my priors, because I didn't really like the guy coming out of college. He got drafted in the first, and I was like, whoa, I don't know. No. He didn't have a very, did he? First, right?
He was second round pick, I think. Oh no, he was a first round pick. He was a first round pick. He was
it's like in the 20s or something, right? And then, but I know that week 1 he came out and caught 2 touchdowns, but his target share was not great. But when he was out there, he did produce. I was looking at targets per game for him not too long ago, and if I remember correctly, it was like a bunch of like 4 or 5 target type games, which I just don't really like that volume. And I don't think that they're getting a quarterback upgrade. I don't think they're getting really a downgrade either. We'll have to see. But looking at the possibility of Dotson scoring me more points than, say, DJ Moore or Terry McLaurin, it ain't going to happen. I don't think will happen. Maybe it will. But I'm going to trade it for like a McLaurin, a DJ Moore, a Deontay Johnson, maybe even an older guy. I wonder how close. No, Diggs is probably still very valued, isn't he?
Yeah.
Guys like that. Maybe even like a Chris Godwin. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure there's other players of different positions that are going around in ADP, but just off the top of my head, I can't think of any.
Definitely. Okay, so sorry, I'm actually you kind of had me go and start looking at his metrics real quick. And because I remember he was a touchdown machine, first of all. That was a big part of it. He was a touchdown machine. He had 7 touchdowns on the year, rookie season. That's ridiculous. But his per target metrics and his per route metrics weren't all that great. Like his yards per route run, 1.5.
Yeah.
Like that's not what you want to see is, so his target share, 15.5%. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not great either. So yeah, the raw numbers were okay, but from a per route basis, he wasn't that great. And I know that he wasn't as efficient as everybody likes to make him out to be because the raw numbers end of season totals, right? So for me, you mentioned a guy who I would also trade him for, Deontay Johnson, straight up easily. And Deontay Johnson goes like a round or 2 behind him in startups.
There you go.
Imagine you could easily get plus value for Deontay, like Deontay plus and move Jahan Dotson for that. I would take Zay Flowers straight up. I know that we've seen it from Jahan Dotson, but I personally think that Zay Flowers could easily match what Jahan Dotson did, not in terms of necessarily touchdowns, but definitely match the per target metrics and probably exceed them. So that's what I'm looking for. Russell Wilson goes 1 spot behind him in startups per bulletproof ADP.
See, that's a cheap way to get a starting quarterback in Superflex.
Right. And I don't think anybody's going to trade you Russell Wilson straight for Jahan Dotson. I'm like, let's be honest. But what if you have a Ryan Tannehill on your team too, and a third, and you just package those up to go get a Russell Wilson? You know what I mean? Like, I'm like that. I'm willing to do something like that because I think you're going to need a little plus on top of Jahan Dotson just in terms of it being a quarterback for wide receiver and Superflex.
Yeah. Or like the Kendre Miller and Dotson.
Oh God.
Right.
Wow. I mean, sweet lullabies. You're speaking the sweet stuff to me right now. Yes, absolutely. I love that trade. Another one, Marquise Brown goes like 2 spots behind him per ADP. I'd take Marquise Brown easily straight up. Marquise Brown's still just like 26 years old or 25, whatever he is, super young. So if you're worried about age, throw that out the window. Yeah, like there's a lot of options to get out of Jahan Dotson and probably get plus value on almost all of the targets we're talking about here, except Russell Wilson.
Yeah, those are some good options.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well done. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think that's all I got other than, join our Discord. I did jump on this week on the Factory Tour, the Dynasty Football Factory podcast with Paul Patterson, again, friend of the show, of course. He's doing an absolutely amazing job crushing that show. He's really putting the work in, and it shows. I was on there with him, and it was a lot of fun. So go ahead and check that out. Like I said, join our Discord, do that, and do it again.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of Dynasty Underdog. Check us out on Spotify, please. Follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Underdog, at Uriah Dawkins, and at Willie Beeman DFF. Have a good night, guys.
Later, fam.
Later.